One is found in the house.
I think so too.
And the other one is not.
My grandson is back there.
It's always fun when you see the girl.
Yeah.
And I dressed up as a baby.
That's what I
It was no fun.
I've been dressed up as anything. Can't remember. Well,
Oh, see, you do it every year. You okay. But this year we just, I remember it.
Mr. Ernst. Yeah. I, by mistake, I sat in your seat, opened it up, and signed your,
Oh, good.
with my name.
That's fine.
Okay,
Well,
very well said.
I crossed it.
The regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Greater Boca Raton Beach and Park District is now called to order. It is Monday, November 4th, 2019. The time is 5:17 p.m. Joanne, please call the roll.
Commissioner Ernst?
Here.
Commissioner Engel?
Here.
Commissioner Rollins?
Here.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Here.
Commissioner Wright? Here.
Thank you, Joanne. Commissioners, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'd like to offer two changes. One, I talked to Brianne on the budget amendment, and we're still waiting on a refund, if I'm not correct, in order to actually do this, and we don't have a resolution in the packet either, so I'd like to defer that until our next meeting, we can have that.
Yes.
Okay. And then I think under number 5, ARTCON, I didn't see scope of services in there, which I think we had requested to be in there, so I'd like to defer that discussion also.
Is that in the form of a motion, Mr. Rollins?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion?
I thought we could take a vote on it tonight, to be honest with you. We really have to defer it.
I would really like to defer it.
If that's the will of the board, I'll go along with it.
Let's call the question.
Okay, we will call the question. All in favor of deferring items number 2 and number 5 to November 18th, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign.
Nay.
3-2. Motion passes. Okay, so now we got out here just a little earlier. Okay, it's now time for public requests. Please step to the microphone and you may give your name and your address. We'd like to hear from you. Okay, Tom.
Good afternoon, Tom Thayer, 4821 North Dixie Highway in Boca Raton. And I'm not going to address the things that we've been talking about for months and months. And unfortunately, the three amigos gave away your bargaining position in the Willow Theater. So your chances of dealing with the city of Boca Raton with regard to the golf course are minimal at best. So I don't know where you're going to go, but for those of you that have read The Art of the Deal, you want to bargain from a position of strength. And if you don't get what you want to be willing to get up and walk out of the room. So that may be what happens on the 12th with your joint meeting. But some of the other things, maybe you can get some traction with the city. I certainly hope so. And just point out in this month's Coastal Star, a great $250,000 gift with regard to Gumbo Limbo and the tower. And so that's nice. Too bad we don't have more people, I suppose, that are willing to make those kind of huge donations. And the real reason I'm here is tomorrow is the first Tuesday. It always comes after the first Monday. And tomorrow, the Federation of Boca Raton Homeowners Association, I'll get it right, has their normal monthly meeting. You're all welcome. It's free. It's in the community center downtown. And you need to park on the Crawford Boulevard side. The city's closing down, thanks to Michael Calvert, our friend.
It's open.
So they don't want you clogging up the city hall parking lot.
No, it's open. It's open.
Come around to the Crawford Boulevard side. Come in the front door of the community center, and we'll be in the Silver Palm room there with a great program. We're going to hear about the Boca Raton Airport Authority tomorrow. Scott Kohut, the Deputy Director of the Airport Authority, talking about all the good things that go on there. It's a money-making machine, and the customs building is working out much better than some of us anticipated. It's getting a lot more action than some of us thought about. The other co-program tomorrow will be Doug Mosley. Big Doug Mosley, who's been behind the Boca Bowl since its inception, works for ESPN, and for those of you who don't know, it'll be on December 21st, which is a Saturday. It'll be broadcast on ABC instead of ESPN. So the Boca Bowl is moving up in stature. So come out here and see what Doug's got to say, and who knows, he may have some free tickets for you. So come out tomorrow, free, Boca Raton Community Center.
What
Thank
time,
you.
Tom? What time?
Oh, what time? Well, we're open at 8 o'clock, and the meeting starts at 8:30.
Thank you.
Coffee will be ready at 8 o'clock. Right, Michael?
I heard that. Harold Chaffee, 6200 Northwest Second Avenue. I did read the letter that the city had sent. I don't know whether you're going to talk tonight or even rebuttal it or send back a message back to the city of what you would want. I really don't have any idea. I guess we just have to wait till the meeting progresses and see. But I wish that before you make a decision, you make a discussion, and maybe you just want to open it up to the public again, just so we can put our comments in, at the end. Or if you're going to do, I'm not sure what you're going to do tonight. Really don't know. I don't think it's advisable to go to the joint meeting without discussing or coming back with some kind of rebuttal of what you would present. Otherwise, it's going to be one of those meetings that nothing gets done. The other thing too is I'm going to recommend to the Beach and Parks that basically that you set up some kind of a committee. Basically if the city's going to do the golf course, you need somebody to basically you input. So maybe you want to set up some kind of a committee with golfers, with a designer, with a group of people, citizen residents, to push this thing through a little bit quicker. All right, it's just a suggestion. All right, thank you.
It's a good suggestion, thank you.
I'm willing to head it up too if you want. I
Thank you.
have plenty of time on my hands.
Oh, yeah. Ask your wife about that. Who else would like to take part in public requests? No? All right, well, hearing none, thank you all for your input. Public requests are now closed. It's now time for the approval of the minutes of the October 21st, 2019 board meeting, which is found on the first page of your agenda packet. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion for approval of the minutes.
Second.
Discussion? You have something?
Change was made?
It was a scrivener's error, we fixed it.
Okay. So you move to approve, I'll second.
Well, no, Bob, you want to say what the error was?
It was on Steve's comments.
Yeah.
Steve's comments. Okay.
Yeah. It said originally that I wanted to control our narrative. I wanted the district to control the narrative. Not that much of a pig.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes, Joanne. Okay, our first order of regular business is the sunscreen MOU. It's on page 6 of your agenda packet. Brianne?
Actually, Jacob will go through it.
Oh, Jacob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Board. You may recall on October 7th, the Board heard a presentation from Brooke Diamond and her mother regarding the importance of skin protection and the dangers associated with melanoma. At the Board's direction, we prepared a memorandum of understanding with the REK Melanoma Foundation to provide for the installation of 4 sunscreen dispensers, 2 at Sugar Stand Park and 2 at the Swim Racket Center at this facility. The district's going to determine the actual location at each facility for the placement of each dispenser. The dispensers are going to be maintained in working order by the foundation, consistent with the board's direction. The district at its cost is going to replenish the sunscreen dispensers as needed. The MOU has been reviewed by the foundation along with Ms. Harms. It's consistent with the board's discussion. It is before you tonight for consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob. Commissioners, do you have any comments or any questions?
Madam Chair, may I make a motion to go forward with the MOU?
Absolutely. Was there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Any other discussion? Now, I do have one comment. I did happen to talk to a dermatologist, and she said when we go forward with our part of this agreement to fill the dispensers, she's suggesting that we use something that is reef-friendly, even though we're not going to be on the beach. But there are fewer allergies to the reef-friendly type of sunscreens that we could be using, and they actually provide more protection. So that's just something for us to keep in mind when we do go forward with filling the sunscreen dispensers. So is there any other discussion? All in favor of approving the sunscreen MOU, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you, Joanne. Item number 2 is the board meeting calendar. It's found on page 11. Let's see here. Let's get to that. Are there any questions, commissioners, about the dates, or have you been able to review it with your school calendars and everything?
We did put the school calendar dates at the bottom of the calendar.
I think it was pretty good.
The winter and spring breaks.
This is, makes the usual allowances for January, February holidays. And other than that, I don't see a problem.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest, let's see, on January 6th, there is no school, but it's okay, I can do that. The Tuesday, September 8th is a Tuesday, just point of reference, since the other ones were flagged. And I was wondering if you wanted to add the quarterly city meetings. And somehow or another, maybe out of the quarterly city meetings, when the city goes into their goal-setting meetings, that there could be some joint effort to at least have a conversation there, to make sure we're aligned.
Well, I think that's something for us to discuss at the joint meeting.
Yeah, I agree, but I'd like to put it on there so we at least kind of flag it,
Okay.
because it will be an opportunity for us at least to collaborate with them.
Okay. So you're saying we need to defer this once again?
No,
Oh,
I approve the schedule, but
We'll add those
just be
dates.
aware that there's these other dates that are out there.
Good suggestion.
Motion, Madam Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the proposed schedule of district board meetings and office closings for 2020.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes, Joanne. Thank you, commissioners. Okay, we are now at the golf course discussion on page 14. We did receive, or Brianne received a letter from the city, and we have not received an interlocal agreement to date to specify a lot. Okay, why don't you do that?
Sharing the microphone. I did have the chance to catch up with Mike Wika about this letter that they sent over. They are working on an ILA, an amendment to our ILA that would encompass these points that they put in the letter. The city is receptive to the input from this board, so if we have things that we want to relay back to them, I'm happy to do that. They wanted to get the ILA to us by tonight, but it is with their legal team, so. But it will basically encompass these bullet points. And they're making every effort to make it a two-sided agreement, not just a one-sided effort.
Commissioners, would you like to go through this, the bullet points, point by point, to discuss this and see if we have a consensus on all of these? Is that okay? Okay, the first one, the city will undertake design and construction of the entire course facility, east and west.
No, I don't have any exceptions.
Okay, Steve?
I don't have a problem with it. I think a little context may be necessary. It would be nice, in a perfect world, I prefer that we undertook and constructed the entire course. Unfortunately, we do not live in a perfect world. Alternatively, they could build the west side, we can build the east side, and we'd be here forever trying to coordinate between the two, because that's the way our history has been, and frankly, I haven't seen anything that would lead me to believe that's gonna change. So it's gotta either be us or them, so at this point, I'm fine with that extent.
Jacob, I have a question
Yes,
though.
ma'am.
Since there are some considerations in our enabling legislation about conveying property, are we able to allow somebody to build on our property?
Theoretically, the answer is yes. It would depend on the terms and conditions and how we were to structure that arrangement, but it would not be a conveyance.
Okay.
It would not necessarily be a lease, but we could license the use, which would not be a conveyance. So there may be other ways to structure that deal. I mean, if and when the time came, we'd be happy to look at a variety of options to consider.
License the use, you said?
Maybe one of several options to consider.
Okay. Craig, did you have something?
No, I mean, we can go through each of these if you like. I don't have any major objections. I have things that I would add to it. And I think there are things that when the interlocal agreement comes about, that that's where you really have to, further discussion needs to happen. So, I mean, top of the list on this whole thing is, you know, I do want to highlight that at the city council meeting and workshop, that Andy called me shortly before that call and said, I said a lot of different things. I conceptually agreed with some of the things he said, but there were some sticking points. And the number one sticking point that we kind of stopped at was, I do feel it is important that the district have approval for the design, you know, just like the city had approval in our case. We were subject, you know, no unreasonable withholding it, but I think it gives them the opportunity to do what they want, but I don't want to live with something that is unacceptable. And, you know, the example I use is if they put the driving range over in the middle of the houses, I think it's inappropriate, unacceptable. I think, in my opinion, I believe in the price positive design. I think the majority of this board does agree with the price positive design. It's a good design. It's a name design. We've taken a long time to get there. But unfortunately, the city is going to take the role of investing into this project, and they want to have the opportunity to do something that may yield a different design. It could be better, it could be worse. As long as we have the right to object to it or work it out with them, I think that's reasonable. And I'd like to at least give them that opportunity to do so. And after all, they're offering to do the build out of everything. And let's not forget that this could come into a significant more cost once you start the construction on the unknown. We just don't know of the infrastructure and what's out there for something that is in the 60s and 70s. So they're taking some of the unknown risks off the table or assuming them.
Well, I agree with Craig. You know my position on this whole agreement anyway, but I will go through. The next part kind of touches on what Craig was saying as far as the design. I think that I'm going to have a concurrence on the general concepts that was presented, the layout that we have with the driving range on the east side, where we have the learning center and the family center over there. I think those are important. What concerned me, I mean, the agreement starts out stating that the city agrees with the general concepts and of the Price Fazio plans, but retain the ability to hire its own golf course architects and contractors. You know, we spent close to $1 million in getting this design. Throughout the discussion, there really hasn't been any strong arguments about the design except for the cost. And with Wayne's sharpening his pen, got the design cost down to a number that the city was approximately looking for. And of course, there's still the unknowns that you mentioned. But I did not like I wanted to have a definite agreement that we were going to be using the Price Fazio contract. And the public weighed in on it. We spent many hours with the public going over the plans. And I really feel like, in addition to the general concepts that we have with the Price Fazio, I mean, we've preserved green space in town, which was one of our major objections, and we helped keep golf in Boca, which I think were two of the three things that we were trying to accomplish. But having the general concepts, I really, like you, I would not be happy with the driving range being moved over to the west side. I think it's unsafe. I think we discussed the location of the clubhouse and its movement made sense from a traffic standpoint to the southeast corner. So if we can come to terms on the general concepts and agree to those general concepts, if they elect to hire their own golf course architects, I think it'd be a terrible waste of public funds that we've spent getting what I consider the best design for that property. So that's kind of my take on those first two items.
I don't disagree with you, Bob. Just, I mean, if we can have a dialogue about it, is that there's a lot of money spent, and I believe all those contracts that we wrote with Price Fazio's, the team there, are assignable. And so the intent there was that I think we all want to get this going and get the golf course going, and it could easily take the city nothing short of 3 to 6 months to look at, redo stuff, and come up with a new architect, all those different things, and it could even be longer. And will it yield them the same result in the same time frame? I think it's going to take them an awful long time to do that, and I think they're probably going to come up with something similar in design. But my take on it is that's a big sticking point for them, so give them the opportunity to do it. Whatever they come back with, if they want to spend their money doing an architect, rebuilding it a different way, what the cost is a time lost for all of us, and time lost on the transition with bringing Boca Muni over or the equipment over. So I'm kind of like, well, that's one of the trade-offs of the whole thing. So it's a question if we really want to push hard on that, and how do we get past that hurdle? Because we've spent a lot of time up to this point just trying to get them bought into the whole concept. And it was met with so much resistance all summer long for months, we all tried. But
Steve?
There are a couple of things here. First, one of the things I think we need to do is to set a date certain as to when the first shovelful of dirt is going to be turned. Because otherwise we could be sitting for years, well, I don't like this, I don't like that, we have to permit, we don't have to permit. Give them a reasonable amount of time, in my estimation, no more than 18 months from the time of the interlocal. Well, I'm trying to be fair and, give them a chance to do it, but by the same token, I don't want to revisit the time frame for the pumps over at Gumbo Limbo, which are 3, 4, 5 years out. The other thing, and this is in looking at the information that Brianne sent us this week on the city-run golf courses, and as has been mentioned in previous meetings, they're spending a lot of money on labor. And if we're at 75% of total revenue on labor, and they're dictating the programming and everything else about the golf course, we're looking at subsidizing yet another golf course. So unless they can come up with a way to put a cap on labor, ideally I think the management of the property should be farmed out to somebody who knows what they're doing. So we can have, we can cap that labor cost and have an opportunity to at least break even. But at 75%, I don't see where there's a break even, and all we're doing is setting ourselves up for another $250,000, $500,000, $1 million a year subsidy of a golf course.
Steve, you brought it up. I don't know why anyone would want to participate in the profits or the losses on this project when we have very little input on, and there's reference into here to input, but, you know, we've had a lot of input, but it didn't go anywhere. And with the, you saw the results of the operation of Boca Community and the losses that they were having. And one of the biggest concerns that was expressed, or one of the concerns expressed during our discussion, were the green fees. And, you know, between the labor costs, I mean, you've got to at least get a proper amount of revenue to cover your cost. And if you're not, you know, I didn't have the opportunity to look up what, you know, one of the favorite courses we talked about is Osprey and their green fees, but I think they're a little bit higher than Boca Muni. And yet it's difficult to get a tee time there. So one of the things that I feel really strong about, I can give up on some of these other items, but if you're going to build it and you're going to maintain it and you're going to operate it, then do that at your own peril and leave us out of the mix.
I agree. And to what you mentioned, I've asked Brianne and Joanne to see if they can access what the labor costs are over at Osprey. So maybe we have some kind of metric that we can use. I can't say that it's not 75%, but if they're turning a profit, my guess is labor costs have to be less than 75%.
Well, I just don't think we need to take a chance on the profit or the loss in participation because we have other places we could put our money.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to, you know, if I'm going to go in there, I want them to know and tell them, well, we don't, you know, it's up to you. If you make $10 million a year on it, more power to you. But if we don't have a say in you're losing $10 million a year, we don't want a part in it.
Yeah, well, I hope they make a profit. I really
Me too.
do, because if they're making a profit, the course is being built to the specifications that golfers want to play it. And so, to me, that's important, and I do hope they do make a profit. I just don't feel like that we should participate in the losses, and if we don't do that, then we shouldn't participate in the profits.
I agree.
So you want that bullet point totally, you want them to have responsibility over the expenses and the profit and losses?
That's my feeling, Aaron. Whether or not
I added up 2013 through 17 losses for both courses, $2,338,641 over a 5-year period. That does not speak well for profits. So I agree with Bob and just strike that out of, you know, and I too hope and I truly believe if they would use the Price Fazio design, that they will show profit, because that's how it's been designed, the whole concept, both east and west. So is there anything else you would like to see added, deleted? I have some questions. If we do go into this agreement with the city, we have some things, some ongoing costs that will have to be included in that ILA. They will have to take over cutting the grass, leasing the fences, paying the utilities. Anything else that you can think of?
Madam Chair, just, I guess, a couple thoughts. I'm not sure I agree to the loss and profit until we know what we're dealing with. So, I realize the more money you spend in it, the closer it'll look like Osprey, and it'll be much nicer, you know, but we never, ever talked about green fees. And green fees kind of determine profit loss, and it's a factor of a resident or a non-resident. And so, I think I've always kind of taken the NGF report on green fees as something you deal with after the fact. when you see what you're gonna do, and then it's a, kind of a, this is a public service for residents priority, so what those green fees are, we're not gonna try to charge back what we paid for the course or the investment in it. But I guess conceptually, I'd like to hold off on whether we fully back out of profit or loss, because that's kind of what we do here too. You know, we are an entity to fund, you know, the services with the city. I don't agree with some of the things they've done at the Red Reef Golf Course. It could be far better, but I think there's an opportunity there, and Michael's team is working on the programming, and they're going to do more with it. What they do here, I don't know. But for this purpose of, in general, developing the ILA in response to them, I did identify 5 things that I think I'd like to see in this ILA in addition to what's here. And if I may, I just walk through them.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so
Thank you.
the first one is really approval of the design, that the district, we'd like to approval of design, the same as what we have in the current agreement. It won't be unreasonably withheld, just like our agreement, only it's reverse.
Wait, so you want us to have full approval of the design
I think
that
we
they
should have
came up
approval.
with?
Yes.
So totally switched of what just didn't work with.
Just we're gonna give them access to all our information, all the material. They can expedite this project tomorrow by, you know, assigning the contract after the discussion. I don't know if they're gonna take 1 month or 10 months to find an architect or do something significantly different. They need to ask themselves, is it really worth it? And I think that's for them to discuss. If you tell me they can get a course for $15 million in price positive design, I'd say take it. What are you waiting for? If you're saying you want to go find Greg Norman or another course operator who's going to make it cheaper, or they're just going to do something that is terrible out there, we need to say no. And I'd rather wait 5 years and put the price positive team in there then, if that's the case. But give them the opportunity to change it. So the first thing is approval of the design, and we won't unreasonably withhold it. I'm sensitive to Steve's comment that maybe you put a deadline on it if you want to do that. The second part is, I think the management, the golf course for the future at the end of this thing, I'm fine with them looking at it as if they run it and own it, but I think they should do an evaluation of whether it's outsourced or not. And that they should do that, the internal evaluation, what makes sense to do it going forward. Because this is supposed to be an enterprise fund, I think you call it. So as an enterprise fund, unlike beaches and other things that just continually lose money, this is a revenue generating thing as well. And I fully expect the family side of it, the greens, all that side on it has tremendous opportunity. So I would say they should evaluate outsourcing it, but I'm indifferent right now who would run it. The third thing is key to me for any of this agreement is I really believe the success of Boca has been the friends of, the friends of Gumbalimbo, the friends of the library, volunteers, and regardless of what happens on this golf course, we have things that we can do in our own shop that we should prioritize for next year to have our own volunteer-based group doing things. But I think having a friends organization with a revenue input, whether it's the driving range or the pro shop, whatever it is, they are the driver of running, of kind of keeping up everything going. We're kind of a funding source, the city is the operating source, but they get a direct impact. And I think it's very important to have that seed of something of a volunteer group embedded in it. And so that has to be a condition of the ILA at the end of it. Certainly they have to have input from everyone, but at the end of this thing, there's got to be some kind of structure for a nonprofit group. And then the fourth thing is, all through this discussion, as we went through the past few months, I heard that they were willing to take over phase 2 fields. They were willing to build more things. Let's not forget that Boca Muni is being sold for approximately $67 million. Not counting the interest that they're earning on the deposits they already have. Let's also not forget that we've committed $24 million. So $24 million plus $67 million, that's a big number in the city's hand. From a city perspective, they have gotten the benefit, and I realize they haven't gotten Boca Muni, but it's almost done. They have a lot of money. That's nearly $100 million in their hands. So we've given them that much, that commitment of 1.6 million a year for a debt payment. I think that's pretty damn generous. I think they have a lot of money, and I think some of that, a big portion of that money should go back into recreation. So I would like to see some kind of commitment from them. It doesn't have to be exactly this thing, but I think there should be a commitment from the city, as the mayor has said, they would build phase 2 of Counselor Hornley. Well, that's been going on long before I've been on this board, so we did our part, we built Patch Reef, and by the way, that was at a considerable cost to our balance sheet, as I found from Mr. Ford. So that, it was good that we did it, it's done, but now it's time for the city to go back to the notes to build phase 2 of Counselor Hornley. And I'd also add that somehow we have to work out where Gumbo Limbo fits in this. I don't know that it's a $30 million complex, but there are opportunities. But I would also like to see us open Ocean Strand in some way or form next year. And if that means building out kayak launches or some kind of bathrooms, let's do it. They have, close to 100 million. It doesn't take much to build out and open Ocean Strand next year. And the other thing I think that should be done is Sugar Sand does need a second field house. And if it can, I don't care if it's the city funding it and building it, or whether it's us freeing up our resources from somewhere else with the city to build that second field house. The one common theme I see as I go with my kids to different events is you just don't have one field house, you have multiple ones. You have multiple basketball courts, you have multiple pools, you have multiple swim lanes. You have to have a full complement of these things. And so as the city has grown, some of our resources are the same. It was very evident at the Meadows Park last week when we had a big swim meet there. It's tight, it's just tight. And so it's not like Deerfield's Aquatics Park, so it's time to upgrade these things. And one of the moms whose kids are swimming at Meadows, she said, this is the same exact swimming pool that she swam at as a little kid, and this is 30 plus years later. So it's time to do some upgrades on some big infrastructure things for recreation. And so I would like that ILA to include, spending some of the money towards recreation and commitment, whether it's us or whether it's the city. And then finally, for the fifth thing is that we jointly evaluate how to best utilize the former hotel site. I think that hotel site, when we talked about building a clubhouse, it's an option. I don't know what the best thing is for that club, that site, but I do think that the city has the capability for zoning purposes to do many things that would be a benefit to the community around there, and that it can include many things. And I'd like to get the ideas on the table and have the city and the district jointly put it to its best use, whatever that may be, and support kind of the structure as a go-to place for the community. So with those 5 things kind of baked into the ILA, even just framed in, would be nice. I'm not saying it has to be exactly this or we end it, but just with that kind of goal and mission to do those things.
Well, that's what we're here for tonight, is to discuss all this. I do want to get a little personal with Steve here. And Steve, we have a responsibility to some people who can't vote for the city council. You and I can't vote for the city council. We can't vote for the mayor. So we do have a responsibility for people who are paying taxes but have no say in all of this.
I agree. We have. There are a lot of things that we find out about after the fact. There are a lot of things that are being funded with our money that our constituents, people living in what has been known as the reserve area, can't participate in, whether it's because of geography or because of the nature of the event. And I would like to see some of that changed. And while it's not germane to this, one of those things is being able to access the city library system, which has been not been made available to us for whatever reason. It's another discussion, but nonetheless, it's something that I think needs to be taken up with the city.
Well, I think something in this ILA has got to address district residents as well as city residents, that they would have equal
Well, that would be-
ability to access the property and pay the same as a resident, and it definitely has to be in the ILA.
Yeah, well, it would have to be that all Beach and Park District residents would pay a resident fee, and that would be differentiated between them and non-residents. And this goes back to an ongoing thing that's been an elephant one of the elephants in the room. We've got so many elephants in the room, it's amazing there's room for us. And that is, what is a resident? And who is, and what is a non-resident? Maybe what we need to do for the golf course is set up a standard that applies just to the golf course. As much as I dislike putting the other stuff off, I think so we can expedite this, maybe set a rule for this and see how it works. It can always be changed, but it would have the fees would have to be the same for all Beach and Park District residents, and access would have to be the same to all the facilities on the golf course.
And we haven't heard from you.
Yeah, well, Craig, I like all your ideas, the 5 points they have. I'm just unsure of how, they're so general, how they're gonna fit into the ILA, because the ILA is specific to the golf course. And I think a lot of those things need to be discussed, like the money that they're getting from the golf course and, going back into recreation and stuff like that, but I'm just not sure how that's gonna fit into a specific ILA for the golf course. And then having a friends organization for the golf course is a good idea, but I don't think that's part of our responsibility or the city's responsibility to do. I think that's a community responsibility to do. I don't think that fits in the ILA. And then in terms of management, I think that needs to be discussed at the meeting, I think, with the city. I mean, you said you're indifferent, but I think putting something in there saying, looking at outsourcing should be an option that they should look into and decide. But in the end, I think that's kind of up to them, what they're gonna end up doing. But we have to decide whether we wanna be involved or whether we don't, in terms of the management at all.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, you
No.
guys start.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think, like the second field house, we need to do, but I think that's a bigger discussion that we need to have with them. I don't think that should be a part of the ILA that we're discussing for the golf course.
Let me say why I tied them together, and why I think they do tie together, is that if you don't put the Friends group in there, it will never be in there, okay? And so I'm just saying, it's gotta be a bullet point that says, at the end, when this thing starts up, we're gonna designate a nonprofit organization with a structure similar to the other Friends group, and let it evolve on its own. But it has to be, make room for it. It's not gonna define it, it's not gonna put it in there, but make room for it. And we'll figure, so someone in the future has that opportunity. Otherwise, it'll be like anything else, the city or the government runs it, and, you may get volunteers, but you don't really get that kind of, volunteer base that's tied in, who's got a commitment to it.
So you just wanna say, here's a volunteer opportunity
No,
as part of it?
no, I'm saying when this golf course is finished and it's got a certificate of occupancy, they will create and establish a nonprofit organization that will be labeled whatever you want, the Friends of the Golf Course, and in there they will have the opportunity to give them some kind of revenue source, whether it's a pro shop or thing, to same mission statement like Gumbo Limbo, whatever those different mission statements are, copy them and just put something in it that's associated for the golf course.
So you're saying the city would do that?
The city just is gonna start it out, and then we're gonna hand it over to that group. It's a nonprofit group. There are plenty of nonprofit groups.
Mr. Chaffee, Would you like to volunteer?
I mean, it's hard enough to get volunteer, I think it's a good idea, but I'm
I'm
just saying,
sorry?
I just don't see how it fits into the ILA.
Yeah, but if you don't put it in here now, it'll never happen. And that's why I'm thinking make it very general. I'd rather have it in there than not.
Let me, I think Aaron is on to something that I concur with. I was on an advisory board with the city, and it's called the Parks and Recreation Board. And we were just at advisory and had, and the reason I ran for this board is because I would be able to make decisions that could actually be implemented rather than just making suggestions. We really didn't have a very strong voice. And if you do this, I mean, you look at the Friends of Gumbalumba, which has been very, very successful. But there's been, internal conflicts in my perception between the city and the administration of the Friends of Gumbalumba. I would say that what would be their objectives, what would be their power, what authority would they have to do anything other than make recommendations, and would the city take those recommendations under consideration since they were the advisory board? Because if not, I don't know anybody would want to serve on that board unless they had some strong input. If you wanted to say, we want to appoint a board, we want you to appoint a board who has the authority to say when you're not performing your job at the level that's expected of us and maintaining that course, that they will listen to your voice and make that change. Because the biggest concern I have is that if the course itself is not exactly to the price Fazio, there are ways you can trim it back to get the cost down lower. But also, it begins to affect the quality of the golf course. Unless we have somebody has some input into the course that says, you're not performing to the level we think you should. And if this is a volunteer group that can do that, and then it has some teeth in it, that's one thing. But if it doesn't have any teeth, you're wasting the volunteer's time.
Agreed. That's why I'm saying put it in there now so it does have teeth. As someone who was on the financial advisory board, I can tell you the financial advisory board had one thing that was a value. Only one thing, well, two things. They said they approved the budget, but the reality limited it all. The thing they only did was it's really approved a taxi contract. And it's written into their charter. And beyond that, it was a meeting that, they ran the show, it was informational, it was nice, it was advisory. What I'm saying is somehow you do not carve anything out and put it into there saying there is a committed group and that we're going to support them, you won't have anything. You will have an advisory board. I don't want that, so I want to at least leave this thing with some group that is there after it's built. And
well, they must have the authority that the city would respect and would have to implement the recommendations of this volunteer board. Otherwise, they are just advisory. And it needs to have some teeth into it in order to do that. Could be so much as to say that, if you're not performing to the level which the district expects to, we'll go in there and fix it up and then build it. I'm just being facetious on that, but that's what was told to us in our ILA with one of the contracts that we had with the city. Said if you don't maintain it to what we think it should be maintained, we'll go in and maintain it and then send you the bill. Basically what I'm saying is that in order for this organization, the volunteer group, to have any authority, it's got to be specifically spelled out as to what their rights are, rather than just, and I don't disagree that they might be of some help to the city, but they could also be a real pain in the neck to them where they stop listening to them, and that's what I don't want to happen.
Well, the question I have is, we have Friends of Gumbo Limbo, Friends of the Library. How do these organizations derive their authority? What makes them listenable by the city?
I know they've been working on that with Friends, but haven't come to any conclusion as far as I know.
Well, but that's my fear with this, is that we'll put in an infrastructure and we'll get volunteers, and Mr. Chaffee just volunteered, I heard him. Seriously, we'll get volunteers, and they'll advise, and the city will say, thank you very much, and go do what they think is right. I don't know if, first of all, if I were sitting on city council, would I want to give some of my authority to a volunteer group, which is in effect what we're asking them to do. Or for that matter, give a volunteer group some of our authority as from the Beach and Park District. I think that's a lot to ask. Would it be nice? Yeah, it'd be great. But I don't know if it's a doable thing.
My thought though is, I'm not trying to solve it now. I'm just saying, keep it simple, keep it general. It's part of it. It's after the fact. They can look at what the best way to do it, but if you put nothing in there, you will get nothing.
Well, I would agree with Craig, and I think you have to put something in there, or if you do put something there, you should be a little specific about what the charge to this body would be. And I think because it's the city's project, building and operating and maintaining it, to the extent that they should probably have, a greater insight into the committee as far as the appointments, but since it's our property, we should probably have the ability to appoint a couple of people to that volunteer board also. And see how that works. But, hadn't thought of a volunteer group that's, that has been generally, effective. I don't know what the Friends of the Library does. I know what the Gumbo Limbo Friends do, and they're very important, make a big contribution to Gumbo Limbo. But I don't know what kind of structure they have between the city and themselves. I've never seen any type of.
They don't have an ILA.
They don't.
They were
So
trying
are we discussing more of an advisory board versus a fundraising group, right? That's what it sounds.
Not-for-profit.
I don't think we need to define it now. I think we're gonna get bogged down into something. Look out whatever the best practices are with our current Friends group, and look at other organizations, find one, put a short paragraph in there that says, when this is done, you're going to do that, you're gonna keep the community involved. And, I think Friends of Gumbo Limbo is strong because we fund Gumbo Limbo. And so when there's a concern, they come running to us and say, what about this? And so, we are in that similar fashion for the golf course. If we're participating in the funding of both golf courses, Red Reef and this one, I think we want to kind of give them that authority to tell us what to do, but we'll work with them. But we don't have to define it now.
Yeah, to that end, I understand the concept that you have there, Craig. I don't know about the funding component for this volunteer organization. I don't want to see them involved in running the pro shop and selling golf balls and handing the tee times. I don't know what else they might be able to do, but I think they could be very instrumental in providing input to the city on the operation and maintenance of the facility. And I think that's probably the extent that I would want them to be involved with operation.
Well, one of the things that give the Friends of Gumbo Limbo the clout that they do have is the fact that they can raise goodly amounts of money, and that they have a dedicated volunteer group that has a specific job within the framework of Gumbo Limbo. And if we're going to do something like what Craig suggests, I think that's where we have to look as far as a model. And to that end, you're going to want people who know how to raise money and have the contacts to raise money. And you're going to want to have a dedicated volunteer force that can come in, even if it's, mending the fences around the golf course. Just,
No, you don't want to do that.
well, I'm just using that as an
From a
example.
liability standpoint.
Yeah.
Well, I think to Craig's point, I think that we can talk about how it should be structured, but I think that since it's a city's operation, they're going to have to put it together, decide how they want this group to work. And the only thing I would say to that is that once that's formatted, that we have an opportunity to have some input on that. And then move on.
Since this is our property, especially on the east side, and will be eventually on the west side, should we have a dedicated representative for the construction and, during the ongoing process of the construction, even though you're saying that you want to give them the right to do the design and the construction of both the east and west?
I thought we had designated Melissa as our,
That's what if we were funding a portion of it,
Yes.
or not.
If I could, in the past, when we funded, like we funded the boardwalk project and the restrooms at Red Reef, Melissa attended all those construction meetings throughout the process.
and since we do own the property, right now partially, but eventually in toto, I think we deserve at least a presence there. And I think it should be one of our staff, and Melissa's shown herself to be very competent in, not only in the ABCs of the whole thing, but also in how she's able to work with members of city staff, which I think is important. So I agree. I mean, just by virtue of the fact that this is our property, there should be somebody from our staff that's a part of this.
What would you envision her authority would be and her responsibility would be in attending those construction meetings?
Well, part of her responsibility would be to report back to us as to the goings on and act as a transmittal force, so to speak, for our ideas back to city staff. Also to present ideas of her own to city staff, of course, letting us know what those ideas are. Having the authority, well, as far as authority goes, there's not much that we can give her outside of being our voice on that board. And I think if we're going to talk about input, we need a voice on that board.
I think, sorry, I was just gonna say, I think if anything, I mean, she should be part of like whatever meetings they have in terms of the design and things like that they do, so she can report back. Because how else are we gonna get what they're doing back to us? So that we know what they're doing, and that we can give feedback back through her, through the design process that they go through. I don't necessarily feel like, that she needs to be there for the construction end of things. I think once the design is done and we've given approval on everything, she can track it with how the city does it and everything like that, but I don't think she needs to be part of the construction process.
And I agree with Erin, because the last thing you want is to have too many cooks in the kitchen with from the standpoint of keeping us up to date on what's going on, just like the city has representatives here in our meeting where we discuss it. I think it's a good idea for her to be present, and it might be a great learning experience for her as well.
The only thing I would add is that after approval of plan and design, it's not our role to implement, it's their role. So for the too many cooks, you gotta have one in charge and it's them. What I would say is, let's not be afraid to help where it's needed. So if there's something that they need for us to do, we can do it. And we should always be there to offer to help, whether it's small or big. There are some processes in the city that just take a long time. And it may be quicker and easier if they say, okay, we want you to do this part. And we should be ready to go do that.
Such as?
Maybe it's building the maintenance shed. Okay, we know what we want. They know they have to go through the process to define it. And maybe it's just getting the maintenance shed built right now so they can start transitioning equipment over. And if they agree on that, I would be willing to get going on it. But that's stuff they have to go through the baseline process and let them do it and let them invite us to do what they want to do.
Yeah, I want them to undertake as much of this project as they've indicated they would. And I don't want to interfere in the process because I want this to be their project. And because I'm buying into the fact that they're doing this project and rather than us. So it's us on the sidelines watching them build this project. And if they succeed at something that's spectacular, like I hope it is, I'm going to be right there congratulating them for a job well done. But I think that we should be limited in whatever inputting that goes on with that course. Give them full authority to design it to our concepts using the Price Fazio. I think approval of our design, I think, is terribly important. But then once they agree to the approval of this design, then they'll have to do the job and pay for any changes that come up. And there will be changes that are going to happen because this site hasn't been. It's from a irrigation standpoint. I think there's going to be some challenges there that are not anticipated. We may not have anticipated. So, but let the city take this project on full bore. And
You know, one other thing in connection with the timeline, with a date certain whereby the construction is starting, there needs to be mention of what happens if it's not. And I think that alternative needs to be that responsibility for construction reverts back to us. And since the city has decided that they're going to fund it, we'll take care of the, I guess you would say, construction management via Price Fazio, and and the city will fund it. That will be. I want to light a fire under the city. Maybe they don't need it. Maybe they feel like that they'll be able to do it, and they'll have the mechanisms in place to get this done on a timely basis. But I want to make sure that they understand that it's got to be done right. And I don't feel that we should be sitting around waiting for permits or any of those things. Those things need to be expedited. Though I really don't know what other permits they need besides their own, from the city agency.
Wayne, can you address that? What other permits does the city need other than their own? Because I think you've gone through a lot of that.
Yeah, there are South Florida Water Management, the Army Corps of Engineers, but nothing as lengthy as what the city needs to provide.
Thank you.
well, let's see where we are here in terms of things we can agree on. Craig's approval of requiring full approval of the design by us, as you indicated.
Correct.
The city would do the construction and the maintenance and the management, of course, and then we want them to explore internal and external
At some point,
management.
at some point, there needs to be an evaluation and justification for internal versus external.
Right. I think the hotel site, and making a determination on that is important.
Deferring that, though.
Okay, but,
Yeah.
right, but exploring that,
Yeah.
If we want to suggest a time frame for completion, I don't want to jump in there and take off a project in midstream and try to finish a project up.
Yeah.
It'd be like us trying to, like we did with the science playground.
Right.
That'd be a difficult thing to do. But I do think we need to stress, as they did in this ILA or MOU, is that they would begin construction as early as possible. I think sometimes you're constrained by unexpected discoveries on the job site, weather conditions that seem to come up during the summer. So I don't know what a reasonable time frame would be to construct the course, unless somebody else does.
I don't, but I guess I would rather structure it that whatever unknowns they encounter, that's their cost and their project.
Well, I'm in total support of that.
Yeah.
But what I'm just saying in terms of the completion date, Steve, I think, wanted to have a time frame on which they would complete.
No,
A start date.
A start date.
Start date.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We did put on here that we would have a mutually agreed upon date, so if they're gonna be the ones constructing it, maybe when we go to the joint meeting, and they've discussed it with their staff who are gonna actually be doing it, they'll have a better idea of the date that, and then we can go based on whatever date they come back to us with and say, yeah, that sounds like a good time frame.
Well, I think that, to Steve's point, and I agree with you, Aaron, but I think we need to say, give them some certain date on which they will have made it, we will have made a decision, so it just can't slide off the table and keep being pushed over. Because you know how it is with us sometimes, we can't meet every deadline that we set, we have to postpone it, so I don't know what is fair and reasonable. Maybe we can ask them what's fair and reasonable at this meeting, and then try to come to terms on that, rather than specifying that right now. And I think maybe that would be the better solution than us trying to establish that right now. I agree. Okay. The other thing that we haven't discussed, and Stu touched on that, was what happens when we pay off the loan? Then does the title of that property then is supposed to revert to the Beach and Park District, if I understand it, with the ILA. So with the title to that property, do we want to, what do we want to do with the course itself? Do we want to say at the end of 20 years that we'll take over the operation of the course, or the city will at least provide us some revenue from that, since we put in 24 million into the land? Most landlords would charge something from the tenant. I'm just suggesting you think about it. I don't have any idea.
Well, to go back to something that Jake said,
We'll be dead.
yeah,
I'm not.
yeah, you'll probably still be sitting here.
Yeah, no, I won't guarantee you that.
Jake mentioned the licensing fee, which would get around the conveyance part of it. The advantages that I see to us retaining ownership above and beyond revenue is that if the commissioner, if the board, if the district maintains ownership, that means that golf course is always a golf course. That golf course is always owned by the Beach and Park District. One of my biggest concerns initially was that if we didn't own it, that somebody would turn around in the city and say, well, this is a money-losing project. We have an offer from XYZ Corporation for $500 million to buy the property and put up an apartment development, or whatever kind of development, and the city loses something that we fought so hard to make sure the city had. You know, it's my intent that this is a golf course now. When it's completed, it will be a golf course. And 40 years after it's completed, it will be a golf course, assuming that this planet isn't just one big giant cinder at that point. Well, maybe even then, I'm sure there's going to be somebody looking for a foursome. But, you know.
Well, Steve, I don't think anybody on here is thinking about deeding it over to the city. I think that in perpetuity, I mean, okay, so some of us may not be here in 20 years, but we need to make sure that those that do follow us follow our decision on what we want, and we want to maintain this, whether or not it's a golf course or a public park. We don't want that to be developed, and the codicils that attach to this land should be specific that will never happen.
I agree. And that's one of the reasons I want to make sure that we pay off what we owe to the city, and title reverts to us, and that that we do everything we can to ensure that Boca National remains Boca National, and it's a golf course.
Just as a question, I don't have the answer to this. Do you think it's fair and reasonable that we paid $24 million into this property, and then post payoff, the only benefit we have is the title to the property? Is that a fair trade-off?
That's a good question. On one hand, you look at it in terms of dollars and cents and say, well, absolutely not. We made the investment. But that goes back to the city coming back and saying, well, okay, if you want a part of the responsibility, you're going to have to also share in the responsibility that we have in terms of the cost of running the course.
Well, we're already in for 24 million, and they're
not in for
anything right
Yeah,
now.
all they
So,
did was
but
loan us money.
at this point, I'm just asking the question, we need to be thinking about what happens when we pay the property off. Whatever the decision is, I think we need to be prepared to make a recommendation. It may be that the recommendation is the city continue to run the golf course and we own the property, the land, and maybe nothing more than that.
That is something that needs to be considered.
So where we are right now is we will not have another meeting before the joint meeting on November 12th. I think Brianne's been furiously taking notes about all the things that we want incorporated into the ILA. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to totally agree on anything at the joint meeting because we can't discuss it here among ourselves and we can't vote on it. So we're at kind of an impasse where, I mean, as much as I think everybody would like to get started on something, we can't do anything at this point. Am I wrong, Jacob?
Well, I mean, we're all in general agreement though with these bullet points, right?
Generally.
I would suggest giving him back a letter saying, look, in general, we agree with the concepts here. The only thing I'm not sure that we agree with, Bob, you were very strong that it said it had to be the price positive design.
Well,
And my question to you is, do you really want to make that the deal killer of the whole thing, or is it not, are you flexible to let them look at other things and spend their own money?
maybe. I'm not real sure, Craig. I mean,
Okay.
from the very beginning, we've been united behind the price Fazio plan as a commission. And the public has been united behind that plan. It may be that something that we had to negotiate, but going in, I would like to say this is to me, it's a deal killer, but I just want to.
So to do that, may I suggest?
Take a look at this before we go any farther. Wayne has reworked his numbers. He's going to be meeting with members of city council, and they may change their mind when they see these numbers and how he has adjusted. He hasn't dumbed down the course. He has just, like the maintenance building is now smaller. Wayne, do you want to explain some of the things that have changed in this, or?
Sure, just in summary, essentially we reduced some of the scope of work. Because we know our numbers are very good, we've had that reviewed now by 2 parties, and they've confirmed that. So this is not a case of we were trying to get 28 and now we're looking at 14. It's a case of how do we get from 28 down, and it's taking out the halfway house, reducing the size of the maintenance center. That will be challenging, but it will work. So things, taking out the belly bunkers, removing the concrete car paths. So there are those elements that have been removed from the scope of work, essentially.
So,
We can talk in detail about it.
no, I'm confident that you and Rick have come back with a lot of very reasonable offers and very reasonable approaches to it, but I don't think that solves what we want. We have to go back with an ILA agreement that we both agreed to, so my suggestion would be give them back a letter that says, thank you very much, and conceptually we agree. We'd strongly like to recommend that you utilize the Price Fazio team, and we've designed our contracts to expedite the assignment of that if you'd like. However, we also recognize if you want to explore other things, you can, and you can look at it. But ultimately, we would like to approve the final design, which it won't be unreasonably withheld.
Okay.
And just leave it at that, and then say for other considerations in your ILA that we would like to have is, I think, go back to the things I said. I don't know if I copied everyone, but I would suggests that at some point, there's an evaluation of the golf course management in-house or outsourced. There is definitely some kind of consideration when the golf course is completed, to have a volunteer group with some authority that in programming specifically and working as a friends group. And the third thing, I still want to have them, I heard this too many times during the summer that, they were going to do phase 2 of Countess to Hornley and other things, and I want to see a commitment to recreation, even if it's small, and I realize it's not related, but it came up too many times saying, you guys are not doing all the things you should be doing, and so therefore, let us take it off your hands, we're going to do everything. So they have in their hands, 67 million plus what we have funded. I think they should, make some commitments to recreation, including assisting with the opening of Ocean Strand. So just put it there as a bullet point, but don't elaborate how we're going to do it, what we're going to do with it. Let them think about it. I think they all want that. So, and then finally we'll jointly evaluate how to best use the hotel site at a later date.
The one thing that I want to go back and address, because I have not bought into and have no flexibility on, and that's sharing in the profit and losses. I just don't believe that that's something that I want to take on. I'd rather have some certainty about where we're going to spend our money in the future, rather than because it's an unknown what the loss is going to be the first couple of years. There will be a loss the first couple of years as a startup. And so I really do not want to participate in that. If they make $1 million, I'll have no problem with congratulating them on that.
Okay.
So,
I'm okay with that.
okay.
Jacob, as far as putting information about phase 2 and Ocean Strand, is that going to muddy the waters too much with the agreement?
Just a couple of observations, if I may, and having re-looked at the letter from the deputy city manager, my understanding is that staff is in the process of preparing. City staff is in the process of drafting an amendment to our current ILA based on these bullet points.
Correct.
We've yet to see that document. And this meeting is our only opportunity to have this discussion prior to the joint meeting next Tuesday. When that document comes in, we'll collectively be able to review it and incorporate any number of these particular discussion items into that draft that we can then send back to the city for their consideration. Preliminarily, if the objective, what I'm hearing, is to send a letter to the city outlining all of these items really as discussion items. Things that we would like to see potentially incorporated into the document, that's a perfectly legally acceptable approach at this phase. But here we are on a Monday, 8 days before our next joint meeting. If the letter goes out by the end of this week, then the city's not going to have an opportunity to really digest that letter in advance of Tuesday's meeting. They might, but again, the value of the letter I would certainly support. How beneficial it would be to frame the discussion next Tuesday, I think just remains to be seen, given the timing and given the opportunity for the city and the city council to review the comments from the board. When the draft ILA ultimately comes in, we'll then have an opportunity to review it, to make our proposed amendments in the bed with the city attorney's office, both among lawyers and collectively among our board and the city council.
In my conversation with Mike Boca, I did discuss the opportunity to add other things to this ILA amendment. And just on the staff level, obviously, he didn't have a chance because there's been no meeting, but I don't think that there wasn't much of an appetite to mix anything else with this ILA. It was just to get this whole project under wraps.
Right, and that's why I would say you put these 5 in a letter, and it becomes part of the city council discussion. Just like they're discussing it, that's up to them to read it and know in advance, and then they're prepared. That's the whole purpose, is just to prepare. And it's not a legal document, it's just a letter that says conceptually we agree, here's our thoughts.
Okay.
And we're happy to work with Brianne on preparing that letter.
Yeah, I would, in the interest of getting this to council, I'd try to get this done as expeditiously as possible, even tomorrow. Because I think the sooner we put this in their hands, the more opportunity they'll have to mull it over like we did this interview.
I just want to make sure that district residents are
Representative.
represented in this.
So I agree to two other items at least. There's one about the profit loss. We're willing to step back away from all profit loss going forward. And that district residents receive the same rates and pricing as city residents.
And do you agree that we should strongly tell them that we would still like to have the price fascio design, considered, especially with all the changes that have
I
been
think you
made?
mentioned that.
Yeah, no, I
Well,
definitely,
in the second bullet point, they do say that.
yeah, just reaffirm it that it's, yes, strongly recommend, but we're allowing them also to go, if they want to pick a different architect, and they do that, but they're ultimately gonna have to show it to us.
And ultimately, we have the final say-so, whose approval will not be unreasonably withheld.
Right.
Yeah.
So does that mean we have to have a unanimous vote amongst ourselves of the design, or it still only has to be a 3-2 approval of the design?
Jacob?
It would take a majority of this board.
Okay. How about a deadline?
We
We'll
said
see that.
we were gonna meet and discuss a date at the joint meeting.
No, it's supposed to be mutually agreed, well,
We have,
according to,
let's when we get to the joint meeting, we need to have an idea of what we want instead of sitting there and looking across the room at
As
each
far as the
other.
start date you need, Sue?
Start date and, definitely start date.
Okay.
I would think, and I'm being very generous, but no more than 18 months from the date of the joint meeting. Which would bring us to May 2021.
Wow.
Okay?
It's a lot longer than,
And,
we're
I'm open if the board feels that it should be shorter, I'm fine with that.
I would suggest start with an ILA agreement by the end of January, because you have to have that first. And then you have approval of a plan and design by June 1st.
Their state specifically in here, they work expeditiously so as to begin construction. I don't want to, I think that we should just express in this letter some concern that we emphasize that we want to begin this as soon as possible, and that when we meet, we want to agree upon those dates. Because I don't think that we're in a position to make those,
Yes,
dictate
that's
that
right,
now.
I agree.
So,
Okay. Got that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we will have a golf course discussion at the joint meeting.
Probably the only discussion.
you betcha.
Okay.
What else is new?
Well, I'd still like to get the CRA because this ties in with the district residents not having a say in where that money goes to. So if it's possible, if they have not agreed on that yet, have they? No, okay. So your assignment tomorrow is to find out what they are agreeing for an agenda, okay? And make sure that all the commissioners know.
Yes.
Okay, that wasn't painful.
Not too much.
As per Mr. Chaffee's request, at the pleasure of the board, I'd like to reopen public requests. Greg?
Rick Alanis. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Rick Alanis, 1780 Southwest 20th in Boca Raton. Thank you guys for your continued support of golf. It's been a long road, and we can almost see the light at the end of the tunnel. Rick and I had a very good meeting with the mayor last week, and we sense that things are beginning to move, and I think compromise on both sides are critical. The 2 points that I emphasize relative to my constituents who are Boca Golf Association, one is that we absolutely commit and get them to commit to the Price Fazio design. And 2 is that Price Fazio builds it. We were very emphatic that the taxpayers have already spent nearly $1 million on a Price Fazio design. And for the city to go out and get some young upcoming architect to put their name on it, which has no value, which will not allow us to charge a premium for non-residents, is ridiculous. And the value of the Price Fazio name, not to mention the quality product, is absolutely critical to the success of this endeavor. And the mayor seemed to understand that logic, and it seemed to resonate a little bit more with him. And I reminded the mayor that in our first discussion on golf, which was over 2 years ago, his main concern, as was mine representing the golfers, was having a reasonable price to play golf for residents. And I think having a Price Fazio design with their name on it will bring outside people that'll pay a premium in season, which will help keep the resident rates down. Very, very important. And the last point I'd like to make, at the last city council workshop, the very last thing they talked about was a Friends of Golf group. And they voted unanimously that they wanted to do it as soon as construction was complete. And Craig, you mentioned the same thing. I completely disagree, okay? We have a board of elected officials here and a board of elected officials in the city council. Not one of you have any experience with golf. I would strongly urge you to put something together or a recommendation that whoever is in charge, whoever's on top on this development, to form this group during or before the implementation of the new golf course, so there's oversight and input. And last thing I want to thank Ricard. I've spent a lot of hours with him over the last several weeks. Concerned citizen, father, and golfer. And his time and effort, I think, has paid dividends and has validated the golfer's perspective on this thing. But anyways, thank you.
Well, we want to thank you too, Craig, because you put a lot of hours, as has Mr. Chaffee and all of our supporters. We really couldn't have done it without you. Mr. Chaffee?
Like you said, everything is relative. You know, if you're going to build a course, it has to be desirable. People want to play. Okay, like Greg said, the thing that's going to carry this course is basically the outside people that want to play here. Okay, that will reduce the fee that people are going to pay. What all relates to back is how much you want to put into the course and what you want to do with the course. You have to be on top of what the city is going to do. Because if things are cut back to a certain point, you're not going to bring those people here. And if you don't bring the people here, you're not going to make money. The fees are going to have to be raised. Taxpayers are going to have to pay more money to support the course. It's just going to cave in. So in the beginning, it's very important. And the same thing I talked about the committee. You should be setting up a committee. And the committee should be structured. And the way I mean by structure is basically should be somebody from the city is on the structure, is in the committee. You have golfers, you have designers, you have all the people that you need, but it should be in the beginning with negotiations with the city on how they're going to develop this course. Because I'm not that knowledgeable about golf, and there are people here that are much more knowledgeable than I am. But you also have to have a committee that basically will bring the residents in, which would be agreeable. You also have to have the city on this committee also. You shouldn't allow the city to set it up because it's your property. It's going to be it should come from you. You know, and I can't stress that point more importantly. It's very important that you step one step ahead of the city in setting up a committee. This way you will have the committee overseeing this project. If the city does it, you won't have any input. And the way that the Sunshine Law is structured, nobody can talk to one another. That's crazy. So somebody from from the beach and park should be on it. If the city wants to put somebody else on, it's the only way we can talk. Otherwise, it's a disaster. You've got everybody running here, running there, pieces here, pieces there. You don't know what's taken out, what's put in. It's just a disaster. It's a disaster the way this thing has to work out. And you can understand that. You know, one councilman hears it from one person, this is what we agree upon, and another person goes to another person and says something else. And there's just disarray. You know, something has to happen that's going to bring all this together. And the only way to do it is form a committee. You know, that basically of knowledgeable people and people that can get things done. You know, and that's all I have to say. But it is very important what you put into this course. I wanted to say something also. The report that the city has done in the beginning, on page 4, okay, it said municipal golf courses. I wanted to bring this up before. Municipal golf courses, okay? And they kept on saying, oh, you can't spend any more than $15 million, this and that. And on that page 4, it says, it's what you put in, you will get back out of a municipal golf course, in bold print. And then 3 pages later, they state you can't spend that much money on a municipal golf course. They contradict themselves right in the beginning. What you put in the beginning is what's going to determine what this golf course is. And there are a lot of different, I talked to people from who play golf, and a lot of people complain about Osprey because there's no trees, there's no place for shade, there are very important factors. This has to be put into the beginning? No, it can be put in later also. But you need a substantial money, and you need substantial golf course built in the beginning for this thing to be successful. And it's all now, not later. Thank you.
Mr. Chaffee, how do you suggest we go about getting this? It would be a volunteer group.
Well, first of all, you ask Rick, you want to be on the committee? Yes, what's the name?
That's right.
There are people that were willing to be on this committee, that have the experience, the exposure. Even if you want the desire to be on it, I mean, you need input from different people. You can't just do it alone. Everybody will you can have 100 ideas, and nothing will ever be done. And like I said, you have to include the city in this because they have to have a say also. So how can they talk against you when they have one of the representatives there? You know, it has to be a meld of people.
Jack McWalter, Lebanon Southeast, Second Terrace. Recommendation on keep on the committee. The city was faced with a different situation called the Education Advisory Board, and they thought since they got away from the idea of setting up an advisory board because they can't talk and stuff like that. I recommend just putting together a task, call it the Golf Task Force. Just keep it simple, look for volunteers, put some structure to it, a chairman, a co-chairman, and which they can talk and they can meet regularly, et cetera, and it's working quite successfully with the Education Task Force. The second comment I was going to make, you're talking about volunteers and pay. The county course, Osprey, has more volunteers than they could ever deal with. They reward them with a round of golf. And when you go out there, you'd be shocked at how many volunteers are running around. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. Thank you. Oh, you're doing a great job. Keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I have tried to get on that course many times, and I'm told, from friends who volunteer out there, they said, you can't get out there because we pay, $5 to play a round of golf. So, is anyone else interested? Okay, well, the second public request is now closed. Thank you all for your input. Right? Approval of invoices and payroll? I think there's a revised.
Yes, I have it. Madam Chair, I make a motion for approval of invoices for a total of $35,161.08.
Second.
Who seconded it? Seconded by Bob. Commissioners, any discussion? Any questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes, Joanne. Okay, reports and discussion items. Executive Director Brianne Harms.
Technical difficulties. We received the consent for surety from NDS. We released our final check, and that project is closed. The RFP for the pool and deck resurfacing that was approved this budget cycle is currently being advertised, so bids are due back December 6th. Staff hopes to have a recommendation to you by the second meeting in December, and we'll start work early January to mid-February. Patrick Park Fields are given their punch list, so we should have that final pay application here at the next meeting, and that project will be closed. I did put some templates in your folders for the retirement plans. One of the things that I spoke with our representative at FMIT is that This particular plan, what I suggested that they fill out this template, and I see the first one doesn't have it accurately, but we can write this to be specifically for executive staff, full-time staff, with 12 months of work under their belt with the district, and then a 5%, up to 5% matching contribution from the district was what I was recommending. So if you guys want to take a look at those templates, and then we can discuss any other changes or recommendations that you have, and we'll get a final version available and hopefully approved, so that we can start in January with retirement plans. The needs assessment is online now at bocarecreates.com. Looks like Boca Recreates, but Michael has these buttons that he handed out, so maybe Mr. Thayer can mention it tomorrow morning as well at his meeting. This is live online, so everybody can get on there and take their surveys and tell us what you want in recreation. A future agenda item is the St. Mark's Reciprocal Use Agreement. We need to have that finalized by the 19th of December, so I'd like to have Sam and Jacob take a look at it, and we'll get that hopefully maybe by the next, by the November 18th meeting as well for approval. That's everything.
Okay, thank you. District Council, Mr. Horowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have nothing this evening.
Okay, Commissioners, I'm going to start with you, Bob.
Well, the only thing I haven't said is that I do respect the input from the audience when we open it up, so thank you for doing that. And I think that that's something that we should stress when we're meeting with the city council as a volunteer structure of some sort. And as one speaker suggested, they'd be involved at the beginning, a task force, I like that better, a task force to be available to provide input. And let's see if we can get some buy-in from the city on that. And it should be something, as I said earlier, should consist of representatives that we select from our board, let the board select a number of individuals. And once we decide on the size and the scope of this operation, and then the city can do a similar thing. And then I think it's important too that they have specific charge, which will have to be worked on as well by somebody. So, and that's it. The final things, I keep getting wonderful comments about the project that we put out at Patch Reef. I've had so many people actually reach out to me at my home to say that the project was well done. I think Melissa did a great job with that. The contractor that we hired to do it did a great job. And folks that are using that facility are ecstatic on the playability of those fields. That's it.
Craig?
Couple things. One is, I had the opportunity to go to a swim meet at Meadows, and so I got to see that pool very well. The next day I spent the day over at our pool. So my question is I'm a little bit concerned about what the cost is going to be of the resurfacing, and we'll see how it comes from the RFP, but I would also recommend that we carefully wait for some of the needs assessment results, because there is opportunity to do more in the swimming area, and I'd just like to wait and see before we spend a significant amount of money, if we're going to change something or we want to do something, we should do it. The fencing structure around the pool, it looks like they painted the post, but they did not paint the metal around it, so it's kind of odd. So I'd ask that maybe you follow up with it to do that. And then lastly is, I had a conversation with Mr. Ford and evaluating our financial condition, and I wanted to inform the board that we spoke about a credit rating, we spoke about debt structure, we spoke about a lot of things. And so I was very pleased with my discussion with him. I don't think it's going to be as easy as we'd like it to be to get debt, a significant amount of debt. So I wouldn't recommend that we do that, particularly as we work through things with the city. My suggestion would be that over the next 3 to 4 months, we tighten up and look at all of our financial commitments, and that we're very clear on what our commitments are and that they're defined. And if that means reopening some of the agreements to make sure they're solidified, we should do so, but that's something to consider for next year. In that same spirit, I would say that we should consider there's an opportunity to go for a credit rating with the, Moody's offers one where you can give you a sneak preview and you don't have to take it. I think we should do that sometime next year because it will enable us to have pricing for the revolver with our new bank, whoever that is. That can be priced to the credit spread, which is appropriate. And more than likely, the credit rating for the district would come in, I would say, favorable. For a tendency, public entities do come in typically at an investment grade for a variety of reasons. So I think, but we don't know until they evaluate it. So you can go to Moody's or S&P, but Moody's does offer a slightly better opportunity to look at it. If you got a credit rating you didn't like, you don't have to go with it. You stop it right there. So something to consider for next year. I'd recommend that we do it, but I do not think we should do it right now. Meantime, we need to be focused on our financial situation to be very diligent about doing things that are not budget. So I strongly recommend that if it doesn't need to be done, don't do it. Be mindful of the things that you're doing and that you spend them in a good, prudent way. Because we've had such big capital expenses over the past few years. We just need to be very cautious with some of them. But never be short on things with the volunteer base. We always have to serve our members and constituents.
Steve?
As a future agenda item, I'd like for us to talk about guidelines for a district policy on bullying and harassment. I think it's unfortunate that we have to, but we do have to. I don't want to hear about any situation whereby an employee or a member of the board or a contractor makes any kind of threats toward another employee, contractor, or board member. I think it's something that we need to take care of and that we need to have rules on. It's a shame that something like this,
It's in the employee manual.
But it's not for contractors.
but I'd like contractors to be covered by it. And I think it's something we need to discuss. I'd like to review what we have in the employee manual and then go forward from there.
Okay, good suggestion.
Thank you.
Aaron?
Get it.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
In that regard, we need to make sure that our policy with the league covers employment practices liability, which will cover those aspects of harassment and bullying and so forth. But the other thing is that, like Craig, I was out and about in our facilities this weekend, and I was at DeHarmony, and I was walking around in the nice unshaded area of the fields and then the sidewalks that we had put out to bid, got an estimate for the shade structures, and then had that, we're then told that the city was going to do that. So when you get an opportunity, find out when that's going to be. I'd like to be able to have that in place before the outdoor season ends in May.
Okay.
I thought by now we probably could have had that done if we had executed that yet. So I think I want to stay on top of that, because when I visit other recreational facilities throughout the Tri-County area, they usually have some shade structure for spectators who are there watching the sports, and I think our park is not complete without some kind of shade.
Okay, thank you. Craig?
Second Bob's thought on shade structures. We need them. I forgot to mention the banking RFP in your last book. Did you want to cover that, Brianna?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We have the banking, we had 3 responders to the banking RFP. So if the board is in consensus here tonight, what I'd like is myself, Craig, and Merv to review them and then come back with a recommendation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Do we need a motion for that, or for that process?
No, but because that committee, so to speak, will be serving as an evaluation committee, making recommendations to this board, that committee is subject to the Sunshine Law. So I just ask those meetings to be properly noticed and minutes taken.
Okay.
Okay, we have a couple of things. I do want to put into the letter to the city as far as expenses that we have, like the Florida bush hog and the utilities and the fencing lease, that they will, if they're going to take over the responsibility, they will take over the cost, because that's a huge number.
When?
As soon as we agree to the ILA. Yeah, we're not gonna continue. And as far as our agreement with Ford and Associates, I spoke to Mr. Ford, and we are going to be getting a statement from him for phone calls and time expended, which is justified. So I think that the board needs to be aware that just picking up the phone and calling Jerry Ford is costing the board money. So I don't think that was really clear when we first started the agreement. I thought if we were going forward with a loan of some kind, that we would not be charged, but according to Jerry, we will be charged for phone calls. Here.
I'm sorry, for clarification, do we want to cease our conversation for now until next year, or?
My take is, first of all, I've only had 2 calls with Terry Ford, and so both of them were less than, I'd say less than a half hour each, so I don't think there's any long time. He does charge $3.50 an hour. I think it was time well spent on good advice. But I'd also say I don't anticipate his bill to be very much. It should have been on the hourly basis. His prior bill, I thought, was a lot, and he adjusted it. And so, yes, I do think we're kind of at the road where we're done with that, but I reserve the right, if the city says we need to do something, and then he would be appropriate bond counsel person.
And a future agenda item, which hopefully we could do on November 18th if we have the time, is Mr. Horowitz suggested we adjust or amend Brianne's contract to state that she is the executive director, not the interim. So are we all in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Are there any other future agenda items that we have? The communications RFP?
That'll come, we'll get those proposals in on November 8th, so we'll get those out to you next week when we get those on Friday. The other thing was the St. Mark's reciprocal use. I'll have Jacob and Sam review, and then we'll get it to you.
And I would suggest that on the banking RFP, you're going to have in front of you banking resolutions, and you will also have, that basically says the authority to do so. I suggest that we should have something of our own rather than accepting the banks, but it has to be mutually negotiated with the bank, so we'll work on that. The other thing that is necessary is the investment policy. The investment policy that is existing is very broad and gives the executive director a very broad level of authority, and I think it should be far more conservative in nature and kind of limiting a little bit in its authority. So I'll be happy to work on that with Brianne and give you something when we do the banking.
Anything else?
MTA.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming and for participating.